From the Arizona Daily Star and Tucson.com, this is the Wildcast.
Happy Halloween. Welcome to the latest episode of the Wildcast podcast. It's a spooky podcast, Michael Lev. We're recording this on the day of Halloween, and we're getting ready for, the holiday itself, but big week for the Arizona Wildcats football team. They're facing the Utah Utes. We'll have an official game preview along with our Pac-12 picks later on in the week. Happy Halloween, Lev. How are you doing?
You're back, kind of like, I don't know, Jason or Freddy Krueger or Michael Myers or one of these these terrifying Halloween movie characters.
Can't get rid of me.
Can't get rid of. Yeah. Justin is back after being out for our second pod of last week. Welcome back, Justin.
Feels good to be back.
Nice to see you. Congrats on the Lakers finally winning a game last night.
Thank you.
That's a big to-do in your world.
Yeah. I'm wearing a Lakers hat right now because I don't know if there are too many times where I'm proud to wear this hat. I mean, they've given me many reasons to be proud in the past, but this year it's a little rough, but we'll celebrate the wins when we can get them. And now they're 1-5. How about that? Here we go.
Arizona has a better record in football than the Lakers have in basketball. I don't know what that means, but I feel like it's something.
And the Arizona Wildcats also don't have Russell Westbrook, too. But they do have some impressive playmakers on the offensive side of the ball, Lev. And that's kind of like the storyline for the Arizona USC game is that, once again, Arizona's offense shows out and the defense – They try, and there are some flashes where the Johnny Nansen kind of shows some brilliance here with his young players, but the offense with Dorian Singer, with Jacob Cowing, with Jayden de Laura. I mean, Jetfish talked about it in his Monday press conference how Arizona went from one of the worst teams in FBS in big plays to now top of the pack in college football. So Arizona's offense is humming. However, they fall short once again against a really good USC team. Sure, were they with their kind of like B team receivers, right? Brendan Rice was their playmaker instead of Jordan Addison or even Mario Williams.
Yeah, Kyle Ford's not exactly a slouch.
Yeah, I mean USC's got good players.
Yeah, neither is Taj Washington. They've got dudes. If there was probably any position where they could afford to lose some guys, it was that. They did some interesting things on defense. They were missing two of their linebackers, so they had Tuli Tuipulotu kind of playing like a linebacker position. It was weird to see like this 280-pound guy wearing number 49 lined up at linebacker, but he was there a lot, and he would creep up and rush, and I think they showed a lot of different looks than what Dorian Singer told us after the game. When I asked him about that, he was like, oh, no, it was everything we prepared for on film. If you listen to the broadcasters, they were mixing things up a lot. And I think that might have led to Jayden de Laura holding the ball a little longer than we're accustomed to in certain situations. I think they actually presented some confusion. A lot of downfield passing by Arizona in that game. And I didn't get a chance today to ask Jed about that specifically. We'll try to address it on Thursday, but I know you've got some figures on that. Yeah. Let's take a look at those.
So the downfield passing was a big part of Arizona's game plan. Or if it wasn't, then Jayden de Laura made it a part of their game plan. So if you look at just the numbers, this is the first half chart. They cleaned it up, but in the first half, big plays for passes 15-plus yards, Jayden de Laura was 3 for 10 for 73 yards. He was 1 for 3 mid-left and 2 for 6 mid-right. And then you look at some of the other numbers. So deep passing was 3 for 10. Mid-range passing, 1 for 4. Short passing, 2 for 2. Screen passing, or at or behind the line of scrimmage, 4 for 4. So a lot of Arizona's big plays, or I guess well-executed plays, were all these dink and dunk type of plays. But Jayden de Laura just insisted on forcing that deep ball in the first half.
Yeah, there was one on a fourth down, too. Remember, he threw down the sideline, and it was incomplete. And they ended up turning the ball over on downs. The final numbers in those categories, according to Pro Football Focus's charting, 5 for 12 on 20+, 4 for 13 on 10 to 19 yards, which is an area where Jayden has really thrived this season, what I would call like the intermediate passing, and given the linebacker injuries and not having super tall, Eric Gentry roaming the middle of the field, I would have thought that was an area they could exploit more. 9 of 11 on 0 to 9 and 8 of 8 behind the line of scrimmage. Now, what you really want to take out of this is just how many attempts there were.
Yeah.
Just as basically the same number of attempts of 20 plus yards as there were from 10 to 19 and from 0 to 9.
Yeah.
And that's a little unusual. It's a very aggressive game plan, and obviously when you have great playmakers at wide receiver,
You have to.
it makes sense to try that a bunch, and they made some awesome plays down the field, obviously. For Dorian's first 2 touchdowns, T-Mac had a great catch between 2 defenders, a one-handed grab down the right sideline. And then, of course, they hit that 73-yarder on the broken play. Can they do that against Utah? Would they try it against Utah? It's difficult because other teams are getting pressure from the edges. When you want to be a downfield passing team, and they have been a really explosive passing team, as you mentioned, you need to have time.
Yeah.
And in a lot of these plays, it's required some wizardry from Delora escaping and buying time in order for the plays to develop. So that'll be an interesting thing to monitor here over these last 4 games. Like, how does the offense look? Will they continue to take those shots? They ran the ball really well in this game. They had the highest average per carry that they've had this season, over 6 yards a carry.
They did so only with like 2 guys, really.
Yeah, because Jonah Coleman got hurt on the first play of the game. I watched it a couple times. Couldn't really tell what happened. Jed seemed to think it wasn't that big of a deal. DJ Williams looked really good.
Yeah.
Maybe even though I know he had that 52-yard touchdown against Oregon, but I thought he looked great in this game. As a receiver, too, he had a really difficult kind of catch down the field, and that's an area where he has struggled at times. I'd like to see him become the goal line back. When you get into that situation like they had, 2nd and goal at the 1-yard line. Remember last year, Justin, they would go to a goal line package. I know they don't have a traditional fullback anymore, but I'd like to see it as a wrinkle.
Yeah.
Put Isaiah Johnson, number 45, at fullback, and put DJ Williams in the I formation with 3 tight ends. And you don't have to run it. You could do a bootleg off of it, but I'd like to see it as a wrinkle when they get in situations like that. Or
put a defensive
you could
lineman.
or you could put a defensive
like
lineman
Keon
in there.
Barnes
Yeah. You could also go Jamari Joyner out of the Wildcat, which is something they've tried a few times this year. They haven't tried it in like a goal to go situation, and that was one of the key plays in the game. That run that ended up in a 7-yard loss and a field goal, and a couple field goals versus a couple touchdowns in the red zone, and that's the ball game.
I was very surprised, though, that Arizona had more big plays than USC because I looked at it, and Arizona had 11 big plays, so gains of 15 or more yards. Arizona had 11 while USC had 8. Now, there were quite a big plays on both sides of the ball, but it felt like to me that USC had more of them, or maybe just more timely ones in this game, but 303 yards gained on those big plays compared to USC's 272. So I think this right here is the recipe to win games, Lev, because, hey, even though USC was without its top 2 players in terms of receivers, the fact that Arizona is right there all the way down to the end, I think shows the progress of this program, because USC is still the 10th ranked team in the country. They got dudes over there playing for the Trojans. So I think that this is something that you can build on. Again, moral victories. I know Arizona fans don't want to hear it, and they're getting tired of hearing it. But think about where this program was at last year, and then compare it to now. Heck, if you were to tell me or tell any Arizona fan, like, hey, after firing Kevin Sumlin, you hire Jed Fish, that in about a year and a half, 2-ish years, you're going to be competing with number 10 USC at home, Arizona fans would take that every day of the week and twice on Sunday.
Yeah, I like your point about that's the formula for success, and I think it applies to this season.
This season,
because
yes.
this season, because the defense, I mean, it kind of is what it is at this point. I mean, there are areas where they can get better for sure, and I'll get to that in a minute. But they're playing a lot of freshmen. So they're trying to develop those players, and those are really key guys for the future, right? Jacob Kangaika, Tai Yungalale, Russell Davis.
So his mom actually corrected us on Twitter. And we need to
pronunciation.
We need to talk to Jed about this, because Jed is like Tai.
And
it's Tai. It's Tai. Uyagalale.
Okay. Yeah, I just shorthand call him TTU. Can I just do that? Can I just do TTU?
We're not talking about Texas Tech.
Yeah. So, yeah, I agree.
Anyway,
they're going to have to. We've talked about this before. They have to win shootouts. They're going to have to be super efficient on offense, make a lot of big plays. It would really be nice to play with the lead in some of these situations, because that maybe could lead to what I'm about to talk about: lack of turnovers, lack of sacks. Could be wrong. You can check me on this, Justin, but I think in all 4 losses in the Pac-12, giving up 40-plus points, 0 sacks, 0 takeaways.
Yeah.
You're not going to win football games doing that. Period. End of sentence.
Yeah.
You've got to find a way to generate more pressure, and more pressure usually leads to more mistakes. And they didn't blitz a lot against USC. I can hardly remember any blitzes. I'll try to check the PFF numbers for Caleb Williams here real quick. But
it felt like
they got more pressure.
Yeah.
Than the previous week. They PFF credited them with 13 pressures versus 7. So that's a bump. And according to this, they only blitzed 7 times in the entire game out of 48 dropbacks for Caleb Williams. So very low blitz percentage, trying to play coverage. They've used a quarter defense, which is 7 defensive backs at times, which is a really cool wrinkle. They actually used Traden Stukes as kind of a rover.
Yeah.
And he did well. He looked comfortable, I thought, in that position. He's a good tackler, even though he's not a huge guy. And Jacob Manu was the only linebacker. 3 down linemen. Very, very interesting.
We need to talk to Johnny about this.
Yeah, we will. We will on Tuesday for sure.
Because early in the season, was it against San Diego State or was it against Mississippi State, where they came out with this 5 or 6 down lineman package? The Joker.
Yeah, 5. It was like a 5-1-5.
Yeah.
They used it for sure against North Dakota State, running oriented team. That's more of like a run stopping unit, because you got 3 defensive tackles on the field. This one you've got 1 defensive tackle, 2 defensive ends, 1 undersized linebacker, and then all these DBs. Isaiah Taylor joins. Takario Davis is out there. Like I said, Stukes is out there. And you're probably not going to see that a lot against Utah. Regardless of the status of Cam Rising and all of their injured players, Utah is going to probably try to run the ball down Arizona's throat, because that's kind of what they do in the matchup against the Wildcats every year.
But I think it's very commendable that Johnny Nansen threw this kind of wrinkle in a game against USC. Now, granted, a lot of these guys are all 18 years old. Like, you're throwing in a Tai Uyagalale, who was just last year playing at Mater Dei. Ephesians Prysock is a true freshman. You got Jacob Manu, who we all thought was probably going to be a contributor in, year 3 of the program? And here he is, year 1, and he's starting at linebacker. I just think it's a really respectable thing for Johnny Nansen that in this situation, trusting the guys that he's going to be relying on for the next few years. The 2022 class is going to be a huge part of Arizona's success for the next couple of years. So to slowly implement these guys is great, and I'm glad that he did it against USC. And throwing out that 7 defensive back formation, that you look at that and you're like, man, that is so unorthodox. Who on earth would do that? A first-year defensive coordinator who's willing to throw the kitchen sink at USC. That's who's willing to do that. So even though Arizona did give up 45 points, I got to tip my cap to Johnny Nansen for at least doing something different against a team like USC.
Now, if you're a fan, you're probably wondering, why didn't they play these guys earlier in the season, right? If they're all so great. And Jed, yes, exactly. Jed explained it after the game. Physically, a lot of these guys weren't ready.
Yeah.
He talked about how, I think he said TyTy's put on 25 pounds. TTU's put on 25 pounds. Kangaika, we're probably botching his name too. I think he said 14 pounds. Prysock's put on 13 pounds. I'm sure that Jacob Manu's put on weight. It's a lot to ask. And one of the, I know everyone likes to bag on Kevin Sumlin, but one of the things that he used to reiterate and made a lot of sense was like the closer you are to the ball, the harder it is to play right away. That's why he went out in the JUCO market and got Josh Donovan and Peyton Fears, and they brought in PJ Johnson for some immediate help. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Arizona doing something like that a little bit this upcoming offseason. I think they'll be pretty active in the portal and maybe dip into the JUCO ranks a little bit for some linebackers. Middle linebacker is a position I think they're going to target. Maybe bring in a couple guys to play that spot. With Jerry Roberts running out of eligibility and really no true middle linebacker behind him. I mean, they're trying to beef up Eamon Allen into that role, but I mean, he's just more of a safety build. I mean, he'd have to put on at least another 15 pounds, and he's already, I think, put on 15 or 20 pounds. He is 6'2" or 6'3", so maybe, but they're going to bring in some big people, I think, in this upcoming portal cycle here to supplement a defensive-heavy 2023 class. And then you start to stack it up a little bit, right? You mentioned this 22 class is going to be huge in the development of the defense. That's what you're kind of, if you're a fan of U of A, that's what you're kind of banking your hopes on, right? TTU, Kungaika, Manu,
Prysock.
Deuce Davis, Deuce Lane, Takario Davis. Prysock. If these guys can develop into dudes, then you might have something, and all of a sudden Johnny's defensive calls will start to look a lot better.
You mentioned Jerry Roberts. Let's talk about what happened with him in the fourth quarter of Arizona's loss to USC. So let's be honest here. I don't think that was the best showing by the Pac-12 refs in that Arizona-USC game.
Both sides.
On both sides.
Yep.
Yes, for both sides. And I think that this will be used for training on what not to do, because let's go to the first half, okay? USC's driving. Arizona gets the ball to begin the second half, so USC's trying to put on points going into the locker room. And they make a big play, and they get the ball, all the way down to the 10-yard line or something like that? I mean, I don't even know how close they were.
10-yard line.
They were
10-yard line.
They were within striking distance of scoring, and there were about 5 seconds left on the clock. Now, of course, you have to get all the guys down there to set up, and they're running, but the clock doesn't start until the ball is spotted. But the clock kept going even before the ball was spotted, and then by the time USC took the snap, the zeros already hit the clocks like 2 seconds. Like, the USC was way late. Arizona was like, all right, we're going to the locker room. They're like walking towards the tunnel, and USC and Lincoln Riley were like, what the hell? No, we need one more play. We were going to spike it, and you guys didn't do that. And Lincoln Riley let the refs have it, and rightfully so. And then fast forward to the fourth quarter.
Well, yeah, but real quick on that. There's no reason that they couldn't have huddled up, gone up to the booth, and said, hey, please put 5 seconds back on the game clock. Started on my signal. And that happens all the time. And they just totally screwed it up. I'm going to read you a tweet from John Canzano, who covers the Pac-12 out of the Oregon market. He said, still amazed at how glaring some of the Pac-12 officiating mistakes are, and blown away that the conference doesn't seem interested in an overhaul. We all understand bad calls. Human error happens. We all make mistakes. No problem. But it feels like a systemic issue to me.
Yeah.
So that was the mechanics, right? That first play. Now, go ahead. What's the other one?
So fast forward to the second half. I mean, there were a couple of bad calls. Like, there was a passing interference on Christian Rowan-Wallace where it could have easily been an offensive passing interference or a no call. And then in the fourth quarter, USC has the ball. I believe it's a third down. It's either a third or a fourth down. I don't know where.
3rd and 8.
It was 3rd and 8.
Yeah.
And Caleb Williams is rolling near the sidelines, and after he already lets go of the ball, he's, like I said, going out of the sidelines, and Jerry Roberts kind of hits him a little bit, but extends his arm out to make sure he's not falling backwards. So Jerry Roberts understands, hey, I kind of hit you a little bit late, but it wasn't unnecessary. I'm trying to help you from falling into the sideline, tripping on yourself. It was a play that we've seen in football for decades. It happens in every single game. And the referee just decided, I'm throwing a flag, I'm calling a personal foul on Jerry Roberts. And like at that point in the game, it's a 3rd and 8 call. The game is very close. You're really going to put yourself into the game? The ref made it about himself in that situation. He's like, I'm going to get involved in this game. And there were a couple of times where the refs were involved and they shouldn't. Nothing upsets me more than watching a football game and the refs are a big part of it. Like, you got to let the guys play in that situation. I feel bad for Arizona and Jerry Roberts.
Yeah, I mean, people thought maybe it was because he got in his face afterward, but if you watch the replay, he started pulling the flag out before the verbal exchange happened.
Yeah.
You know, Jerry Roberts jumped because, you know, he was trying to maybe get a piece of the pass that was thrown. And as he turned his head to look to see where the ball was going, then he bumped him. He wasn't even looking at him. So it was clearly unintentional. Reaches his hand out to make sure that Caleb Williams doesn't fall over. Gets in his face briefly. No headbutting. Clearly, there was no like bang. Sometimes you'll see that, right? Guys will just nudge the other guy with their helmet.
Yeah.
There was none of that. And to call that foul in that critical of a situation, to me, like you said, it's over officiating. It's like you're inserting yourself into the game unnecessarily. Remember earlier there was that play where Caleb Williams didn't go out of bounds and he was kind of getting into it with some of the USC defenders and they were kind of jawing and bumping. It was on the near sideline. No flags there.
Yeah.
How about the fact that Caleb Williams had FUAZ painted on his fingernails during the game?
I didn't know that.
Did you see any of those photos?
No.
Yeah. That's cool? That's okay? That seems pretty unsportsmanlike to me.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It was a mess. And the officiating in the Washington game wasn't very good either. You know, you remember they had the fumble by Jacob Cowing that they ended up overturning. They had the weird call on the lateral where they immediately like ruled it an incomplete pass.
Yeah. The T-Mac touchdown.
The T-Mac touchdown as well, which they had to overturn the initial call. So, you know, people are like, I defended George Kliavkoff maybe during the basketball season. We're like, how come he hasn't fixed the officiating? I'm like, he just got on the job. Give him time. Well, time's up.
Yeah.
Fix this mess.
Yeah.
Because it is a mess.
Yeah. All right, Lev. Now moving on. We didn't solicit questions for the Twitter mailbag. Usually we do it every single Monday.
This is what happens when you go away for a few days.
I go
Everything
away for
just
a few
gets out of
days.
rhythm. Yeah.
I had a little too much candy this weekend. It got crazy. I forgot about it. So.
Caught up in that Lakers Nuggets game.
Yeah, so I do apologize for not taking Twitter mailbag questions, but we will be doing so next week. So we appreciate all of our listeners who participate in those. So we'll be doing a post-Utah mailbag for next week. I'll make sure to have that Twitter mailbag open. But, Lev, I wanted to quickly get your thoughts here because if I were to ask the Wildcast podcast a question.
Oh, you got one. Okay.
It has nothing to do with the Arizona Wildcats, but it has everything to do with Tucson because a Tucson native made his first career start for the ASU Sun Devils this weekend. Trenton Bourguet throwing for over 400 yards in a win for the Sun Devils. Now, granted, it was against Colorado, but a former walk-on throwing for over 400 yards, getting a few touchdowns in there. I thought it was a great first showing for Trenton Bourguet as a starter. He was inserted into the game for an injured Emory Jones a couple weeks ago against the Washington Huskies, led ASU to an upset win over number 20 Washington. And then the next week, Sean Aguano said, hey, Emory Jones is our guy. And then Stanford, all they needed was 5 field goals to beat ASU. They made the change, and Trenton Bourguet is now the starter. And Sean Aguano had a press conference on Monday and said Trenton Bourguet is the starter for the remainder of the season.
Does it give you a little pause about the Territorial Cup? A little more worried about it? I mean, a lot of people sort of penciled that in as a
easy win.
I wouldn't say a sure win, but a very winnable game. If they can trade blows with Arizona with a competent passing game, I think that does change the equation a little bit. That'll definitely be a huge storyline heading into that game, assuming that Trenton remains the starter. going in there. How are your Pac-12 picks this week, Justin?
Oh, man. Well, let's throw Utah out of the window.
Yeah, that was bogus.
I'm done.
That was bogus. We obviously, no one knew that Cam Rising wasn't going to play in that game. We all took Utah, so they didn't cover. I was celebrating in the elevator, heading down to the press conference after finding out that Colorado had come back and backdoor covered against ASU. Punt return touchdown in the last few minutes of the game. Outstanding work by the Buffaloes in that one. I think the only kind of obvious easy cover was UCLA against Stanford. I think I had said that I didn't want to be in that position late Saturday night of having taken Stanford and looking up at the scoreboard and seeing them down 38-10, and that's exactly what happened. So I was glad to have taken the Bruins, but you got to turn it around, Justin. You've been sliding. You had a huge early lead.
Yeah.
In our picks against the spread, and things have gone the wrong way.
Yeah, because we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games picked. I went 1-4 against the spread last week.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, but straight up, doing okay. So picking the spread, I'm terrible. Money line, I'm awesome this year. But we'll have our Pac-12 picks later on this week in our pre-Utah podcast. Any interesting games to you, Michael Lev? I mean, we got Oregon State, Washington on Friday, and then Oregon, Colorado.
That's a sneaky good game, the Friday game.
The Friday game?
Yeah.
And the UCLA, ASU, very interesting game.
Also
in Tempe.
Sneaky good now.
Yeah. Because
of the way ASU played offensively. Don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but I still like UCLA in that game. They're just so physical. Zach Charbonnet, man. Stud.
Yeah.
I'm looking ahead a couple weeks from now. What would you set the over-under on Zach Charbonnet yards against Arizona?
Ooh.
I mean, would you set it at
120?
120?
125.5.
175? I mean, if they keep giving him the ball?
Yeah.
Is there any way you take the under on 120?
No, I take the over.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think you're setting it too low.
Too low? Man.
Yeah. That's a scary thought.
I also think that's an indictment on how bad Arizona's run defense is.
Yeah, and it's been better the last couple weeks, but that's going to be a really rough matchup. I will say real quick before we get out of here, I think Utah is more vulnerable than UCLA based on their injuries and the way they've been playing lately. We'll see if I'm right.
And that'll do it for this episode of the Wildcast podcast. Depending on when you're listening to this podcast, happy Halloween. If not, happy November. Thank you all for listening to this episode. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the Wildcast on Apple or Spotify. And as always, don't forget to download the Wildcaster app for free off the App Store and Google Play. College basketball season's around the corner. We just had our college basketball preview section in this past Sunday's Arizona Daily Star. All of our stories are all on that app.
Amazing work.
Thank you.
By the team.
Thank you.
That basketball section is just, there's so much stuff in there. I just couldn't believe how much work you guys did. So congratulations on that.
Appreciate you. And appreciate you guys for listening.